Today we're going to work on just kind of building form and figuring out how to create the form of your skyscraper in the first place. And so we're going to kind of work through this strategy. Today we're going to have a base of 200 feet by 100 feet, and our overall height is going to be 600 feet. So same base size, but it's not quite as tall. So I went ahead and I opened up Rhino. I have a blank large object inches template set up for myself here. And we're going to start by just kind of building out and thinking about how to create these buildings in the first place. So in its most simple sense, we could go in to our box corner to corner, start at 0, 0, say at 100 feet, comma, 200 feet. Oops, helps if I type it correctly. There we go. And our overall height would be 600 feet. And that would be our most basic building form. There it is. Not particularly exciting. We're going to get to making it more exciting. So if we have that kind of a building, we could certainly start to work with it. We could transform it. Or we could start with kind of creating lines to give us guidelines and then manipulating those. So for example, I could do another building next door. Let's go over. And this time, instead of doing a box corner to corner, I'm doing a rectangle. Oh, I forgot a comma there. And I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, well, what if I cut off one of the sides? So let me turn on my midpoint snap. Let's say I cut that side like that, and I clipped it. We'll take this, we'll trim that piece off, and then I'll take these and join them together. And then maybe I'll create another rectangle. We'll move this, so I'm typing move, V for vertical, and we'll go up maybe 300 feet. And maybe that stays like that, and then maybe I'll take this one, vertical by 600 feet. Oops. Don't need this one. And then maybe these, I take this and I loft those together. Now here, the joint matters. So I want this joint to actually be there for that side. And so it's twisting. And maybe that's twisting too much. Maybe I need to adjust it a little bit more. Maybe I will let's see, let's come over here just a little bit on the corner here. Let's go over. There we go. Let me join those. And then let me loft these two. That makes it a little bit cleaner, so they're not twisting as much. So I've given myself a little corner there. And then we'll take this piece, and we could loft that together. And again, I want this seam to happen there. And so maybe it looks like that. So in this scenario, to get the top and the bottom, I would need to take the curve, and then I can patch it. I could do a surface from 3 or 4 corner points too. That would work, but it depends again on how many corner points you have. Patch is pretty easy, so there's one more. We'll patch that one, and the U and V spans I edited to be 2 and 2, and that creates the top and the bottom. So it's got a little bit more flair to it. I could take those in the same capacity here. Copy those. That's the next set. I could, I don't know, let me, clip the other side here. Trim those. Oops. Joined. And then I could say, okay, let's take these, let's loft those. And yeah, that should work. And then I could take this and this one, and I could loft those together like that. I'm paying a lot of attention to my seams to make sure I hit my seams correct. So maybe it's like that. So I'm starting to manipulate the shapes, and I'm doing this by creating a series of control curves and then manipulating them. The thing about it, though, is frequently you're limited to, okay, well, I have these control curves, it's based on those certain levels, and then I just make my adjustments, and it's always straight in between. Sometimes you actually want to start to manipulate your object in a little bit different manner. So let me take this piece again, and let me bring it over here, and let's say I want to just work to manipulate this particular piece. Now, if I want to manipulate that piece, I could come over and turn my, I think it's the control points on. I don't have enough control points on that one yet, so I really can't manipulate it by too much. So instead, I can use what's called a cage edit, and that's where this whole thing was going. And I can create that by typing in cage edit, or going under, I think it's under transform, and then cage editing, cage edit. And so I can either I type in cage edit, or I select that, and then it says first to select the captive object. So this is the object that's contained inside this edit. So in this case, it would be this building. I'll go ahead and press enter when done. Select control object. I'm going to use a bounding box. So around the outside of my building here, I'll click on bounding box. Then the rest of these options are just fine. So the coordinate system will use the world. My cage parameters. I'm going to keep this first one really simple, and we'll talk through what this means. So my X point count, I'm going to say 2. My Y point count, I'm also going to say 2. And my Z point count, I'm going to say 2. When I'm done with those, and they all say 2, 2, and 2, the degrees have also changed to 1, 1, and 1. I'll explain what degrees mean in just a second. I can go ahead and press enter. Region to edit global, that's the default, that's fine. And so when I do that, you see that I now have control points on the top. There's 4 there, and there's 4 at the bottom. Do you guys see those points? There, I'll highlight them up. I can then manipulate those points. So I could take, say, those 4 points. Let me use my center snap to do this. Oh, come on, let me snap to the center. Doesn't like me. Let's go over like that, and let's rotate this whole top by, say, 15 degrees. And so that then manipulates this shape by 15 degrees, and it causes that building to twist. Let's take this, and let's explore what some of my other options would be. So in this case, the sides just stayed straight. Let me take this piece, and I'm going to once again do a cage edit. So I'll type in cage edit. My control object is going to be a bounding box. My coordinate system is going to be a world. The X point count I'm going to leave at 2. The Y point count I'm going to leave at 2. The Z point count, however, I'm going to change from 2 to 3. So I change that. I'm going to leave the degrees set as 1, 1, and 1 again. When I press enter here, you're going to see one more global. You're going to see that I get a third set of control points. So you see in the Z now I have 1, 2, and 3. This is going to allow me to select the middle of the object this time instead of just the top, and I could rotate that one by 15 degrees. So let's do, I'm going to just rotate it from that point by 15, and you can see that the whole building kinks out, keeping the top and the bottom straight. Now, each of these so far I could have done with a loft. They're not too complicated. Let's take this same object and do it again. And we're going to change that degree option. So there you go. So you see I'm just stacking these up as I'm going through and experimenting with them. You're going to do something similar. You're going to create a lot of shapes today until you decide which one you like the most. So I'm going to take this one. I'm going to go through that cage edit again. So cage edit again, bounding box again, world again. Now here, the x is still going to be 2, the y is still going to be 2, the z is still going to be 3, but I'm going to leave the degree of 1, 1, and I'm going to change the z degree here to be 2. So everything's the same except that z degree. I'll press enter, region to edit global, enter, etc. So let me take the same 4 points, the same middle points, and I'm going to rotate them again from this corner by 15 degrees. So everything I did was the same. But now this time, instead of having a hard kink there, it's because this is now a two-dimensional curve, it's now arcing instead. So I'm able to make a smooth curve there instead of a hard curve there. So just by changing that degree. The third degree curve, we could switch to the third degree curve, is going to give us results that won't unroll flat. And I'll show you that in a second so you can see it. But generally speaking, we try to stay away from those. So there's our first set there. Let me go ahead and copy this again. And we'll bring this one over. I'm going to do a cage edit. Bounding box, world. I'm going to up my point count. So we're going to say 3, 3, 4, and I'm going to change this degree to 2, this degree to 2, and this degree to 3. Okay, so I have all those set. I'll go ahead and go to global. There we go. So you see now I suddenly have a lot more control points that I can work with. So I could take this group and I could do the same rotate. Rotate. Let me turn on my point snap so I can snap to these points. And I can say, okay, this is going to go, I'm only going to do 5 degrees this time, so it's not quite as extreme. Well, let's do 10. There we go. And I could take those, and let's do -10. And so now the building has this little S shape to it. But I can also say, let me take this point, and sometimes you have to see this in a different view. Let me do ghosted so I can see. There's my other control point. So I'll take these two. I can then move them, and I can have one side bulge out. Let me go to shaded like that. See how that side bulges out? This side, however, curves in 2 directions. So it's kind of like a globe. If you were to unroll a globe, or let's do an orange. You can't unpeel an orange without breaking the peel somewhere. You can't just suddenly make it flat. So if we were going to create this as an unrollable surface that we could laser cut, this would never work. Could we 3D print this shape? Absolutely. So you just have to be aware of what kind of methods you could ultimately do. If you end up creating a building that has a bulge like this, we'll do a simplified version for the unroll in terms of the assignment. Today I want you to experiment. Feel free to kind of play around with this stuff. I could take these 3 points here. Let me switch back into that ghosted. Sometimes you have to do that to be able to pick these. And I could move them out here. And so now the building's bulging in 2 different directions like that. Sorry. Go back to shaded. There we go. Now the thing about it is, I don't have to be limited to just starting with this rectangle. So I could start with this shape that I created. Let me go ahead and join it together so it's a closed poly surface. Let me copy it. And we'll drop it right there. And I could do the same transformation to this. So I could go into cage edit. I could say bounding box, world. I'm going to drop this down again. And I'll go ahead and hit enter, and then global. And now I could take this and I could say, okay, let's take these and rotate them by -10. And let's take these and rotate them by, say, 10. And now I can manipulate that building such that it goes in and has those arcs. Okay? So essentially, I have flexibility when it comes to whatever I want to do with the shape. So I can create the shape first, then perform a cage edit. I don't have to create the cage edit. I could do a building this way. It really doesn't matter. It's a matter of personal preference and design. I'm going to change this a little bit. Let me do this at... That was not what I wanted. I'm just going to keep that building slightly rotating, like that. I'm going to work with this particular building going forward for now. So let me go ahead and copy it over. I'm going to kind of isolate it over here. And then I'll take all of these buildings and I'll put them on their own layer. So let's call this building trials. And I'll right click and say change object layer. And then we can turn off those, and we're now down to this is my final building. This is the one I like. And I'm not saying that this is a particularly good building. You create your own building and have it look the way you want it to look. So now the next piece of this is we're going to work through creating the floors for this building and or the elevator core shaft that goes through the building. So to create the cores for this building, I'm going to go ahead and let me start working this. I'm going to call skyscraper. I'm going to create a new sublayer for floors, a new sublayer for skin, meaning the outside, and a new sublayer for ceilings. Okay, so let me make the floors layer active, and actually I should take this and put it on the skin layer. There we go. And to create the floors, I'm going to create a rectangle. It'll just be a rectangular plane, corner to corner, that is larger than my building footprint. So I'll look at it in the top view, usually that's easiest, and just make sure that this is larger than my building footprint. There it is. So if I'm creating these floors, I need to know at where do these floors occur. And part of the reason I gave you the size is so that we can define these relatively easily. So the floor-to-floor height is going to be 16 feet, but the first floor, the lobby floor, is going to be 24 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and take this plane, I'm going to copy it, V for vertical, and it's going to go up by 24 feet. So I'll type in 24 feet. That gives me my first floor. I could then take that floor and I could copy it, V for vertical, and this one would be 16 feet. And then I could do 32 feet. You guys get where this is going, right? Now that's a lot of work. So the alternative there would be to take this first floor and I'm going to do an array. So the array, number in the x direction, this is like that curtain wall that we did. Number in the x direction will be 1, number in the y direction will be 1, and number in the z direction is going to be, I think it's 37, for 37 floors. I'll go ahead and hit enter. Z spacing or first reference point. I know that it's going to be 16 feet between these, so I could just type in 16 feet. And when I do that, I'm going to get a little preview here that's going to let me see what does it look like. And yeah, it looks like I got one all the way at the top. I don't need that one at the top, so I could change the number here to just 36 so that I end up with one less than the top of the building. So again, this was all set up by math so that you guys have the numbers of these floors and how much space is between the floors, etc. So now that I have that, I can go ahead and press enter. And we can see that I have all of those floors in the building. It's time to make those floors the same size as the building because obviously the building changes as it goes up. So I'm going to do a trim. I'll take my skin of the building here. I'll go ahead and type in trim. And then I will work my way down the outside of the building like this. It's a lot of work to click each of these, so I can select them and do larger groups. I don't encourage you to do all of them at once, though it probably will work. Sometimes it causes Rhino to crash, so do little groups as you work your way all the way down to the building. Now this bottommost one, I already actually have a floor. I created the floor in the first place, so I'm just going to delete that one. And so if I was to turn off the skin, we'd see all of the floors, the floor plates, represented here. So now it's time to do all of the ceilings. So we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to think about where the ceilings are placed. There's a reason that the ceilings are different than the floors, and that is because in a building like this, there is space in between the ceiling and the floor where the utilities go. The lights, the ductwork, all the stuff of the building, the structure of the building, etc. So I've given us 4 feet in there of space for those kinds of things to happen, the structure, the ductwork, and all that sort of thing. So same strategy, I create a rectangular plane corner to corner larger than my building, and we'll start by just moving it vertically. So I'll type in move, V for vertical, and this first one is going to go up by 20 feet because the first floor to floor was 24 feet. So I'm going to go up by 20 feet, and that'll create the first option. From here up, it's still every 16 feet because I set the position right. So if I went up 16 feet, I'd be 4 feet below, going all the way up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that array again. Number in the x direction would be 1, number in the y direction is 1, number in the z direction is 36, and my z spacing is again 16 feet. I'll go ahead and hit enter, and I should be able to preview this to say yes, it's pretty good. In this case, though, I need an extra one. So I need 37 because I need the ceiling up here at the very top of the building. So I changed the number to 37. So there they all are. I can go ahead and hit enter. All of those are now on the ceiling layer because that was my active layer. And I can go ahead and do the same trim. I'll select the building skin. I'll go ahead and type in trim. And we'll get rid of small groups until we're done with all of the ceilings. So now if I were to turn off the skin, we'd see essentially like double floors, where this would be the space in between that you could inhabit, and this would be the space for the structure and the building systems. So the next piece of this would be to actually punch an elevator core through the building. So the elevator cores tend to be straight unless you have a really fancy elevator that goes on a diagonal or something. So we're going to go ahead and create that part. So let me, using the skyscraper layer, I'll create a new sub-layer for core. I'll make that active. And I'm going to set up the core using my top view. And the reason I'm using my top view is you can see how the walls shift by floors here, but we can clearly see the part of the building that's just straight up and down. I want the core to go through that part of the building. So I'll go ahead with my box corner to corner, and I'll start it somewhere in here. So I would do that at 30 feet by 30 feet. So I'm going to do negative 30 feet, comma, negative 30 feet because I wanted it to go in that direction. And then I'll switch over into my perspective view. Now the elevator core is typically a little bit taller than the building, so it's going to go up onto the roof. And by the elevator core, I mean elevators and stairs. I'm not going to make you actually model out the stairs, don't worry. But it's elevators and stairs, and it's the services that go up through the building. So in this case, we'll do it at maybe 610 feet, something like that, 612 feet. So let's go ahead and type 612 feet for height. And there is that elevator core going through the building. If I were to turn the skin back on, there we go, now we can see it punching all the way through the building. So I need to make that transparent so that I can see through it. So I'm going to take that elevator core and I'm going to go ahead and explode it, and I'll hold down the control key and deselect the top. Oops, it would help if I actually deselected the top. There we go, not the back side. Let's try that again. Control key, deselect just the top. There we go. Then I'll type join. So I exploded, deselected the top, and then rejoined together. And I did that so it's easy to select the core without the top on it. I could take the top and just delete it to look inside it, or if I need it ultimately, I could put it on its own layer and turn it off, or I could just type hide, which makes it go away temporarily. Now I need to trim out every one of those floors with this elevator core. So the easiest way to do it is to actually align your view such that you're looking straight down into the elevator shaft like that. Right about there. And then go ahead and type trim. And you can click your way down as if the elevator was going down through all of those floors. I'm giving my mouse a workout here. And there we go. And I made it to the bottom of that elevator shaft. So now I want the top to come back on. So we'll go ahead and type show, and that will bring the top back. So I have the skin. I have all of the floors. I have all of the ceilings, and I have that elevator core that goes all the way through. So those are the components of my building. Now it's time to work through some materials. So let's open the V-Ray Asset Editor here. I'm going to go to Materials. We'll expand out to the left. I'll look at concrete. Let's look at the concrete flooring here. So maybe I like that floor. We'll go ahead and drag it over into my materials list. There's the concrete floor there. I'm going to right-click on the concrete floor and say Apply Material to Layer, and it's going to be the Skyscraper Floors layer, like that. Now maybe when it comes to the ceiling, I want something a little bit different on the ceiling here. I'm not sure I really want wallpaper on the ceiling. Let's do the wall paint fine grain white. I'll drag that one over. There it is. I will right click on it and say apply to layer, and this is going to be on the ceiling layer. The core, I don't know, maybe I want the core to be back to concrete. Let's see what concretes we have here. Let's try that concrete simple. All right, that'll work. I'll right click on it and say apply to layer, and this is going to be the core. So the last piece was the skin. So let's see what glass is available to us in the V-Ray options here. And again, I'm not sure that any of these options are going to work that well. We could try, let's try the glass tinted black. Go ahead and drag that one over. I'll right click on it and say apply material to layer, and we'll put that on the skin layer. Alternatively, I could open one of those light or dark skyscraper materials. If we downloaded those, I can do that by clicking on the import VR matte file. And then in the dialog box here that pops up, that's hidden conveniently behind my asset editor, there we go. I'll go onto my flash drive. I already have those saved on my flash drive. You guys would save it on your flash drive. Let me go into my glass folder, and there's my skyscraper dark and light. I'll do light, and we'll go ahead and open that one up. And there it is. You can tell it's a little bit different from a reflective standpoint, and I could apply it to that. I'm going to try the tinted black first, see what happens, and then we'll come back to the other one and see which one we like a little bit better. And I want to spend some time prepping the file, getting it ready to insert it into the city of San Francisco. So now's our time to really kind of clean it up, make sure the texture mapping is working, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to clean everything up. I already have skyscraper, floors, skin, ceiling, and core materials applied, but the environment and its sublayers I don't need, so I'll go ahead and hit the X here to delete those layers. Yes, go ahead and delete those objects. And then I also had a holdover here of my old buildings, all of those pieces. I don't need them anymore either. So I'll click on the buildings and then get rid of them. Yeah, you can go ahead and delete those. And I'll also get rid of layer 5 here. So I want to be as clean as I can be. So I just have the skyscraper and then the floors, skin, ceilings, and core. I'm going to take my building and I'm going to move it from this point to 0.00. So I'm going to go ahead and type move. Oh, I need to turn on my snap here. And we'll move it to 0, 0, 0 to put it at the origin. Z for zoom, S for selected gets me to where I'm seeing just the building. I have not turned off my OpenGL just yet, so that's going to be problematic. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to Tools and then Options, and under View, I'll click on OpenGL and turn off that GPU tessellation, and that'll let me see my building correctly. So now I have my building. It's on 0, 0, and it's time to double check my various materials to make sure they're applying correctly and at an appropriate scale for the building. So I'm going to turn off everything but the skin for right now, so we'll concentrate just on the skin. And the skin, if I remember correctly from last time, has a material already applied to it. Let me open the V-Ray Asset Editor here. I'll go to Materials, and I had two different options for skin. I used the glass tinted black, and I also used the skyscraper light. I'm going to go ahead and use the skyscraper light for my material for this particular building. I also have the skyscraper dark. If you'd rather use the dark material, either one of those can work. I'm going to right click on it and say apply material to layer, and it's going to go on the skin layer. I may have already had it, I don't remember from last class. And if I were to switch to my rendered view temporarily, it really doesn't look right. I'm not seeing too much to my skin here. So I'm going to go ahead and start to work with some texture mapping, see if I can make this appear a little bit better. So let's go ahead and select the object. There it is. I'm going to go over to texture mapping. So I'll click on my properties, go to the texture mapping option. And my building is roughly a rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and use box mapping for it. For some of you, you have more complicated shapes, in which case sometimes you have to work with the texture mapping a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and use the bounding box, world, and we'll go ahead and cap it, yes. And now I have my texture map. It still doesn't look really spectacular just yet. So let me go ahead and show my mapping, in which case we'll get a box representative of my mapping. Now this particular material, the skyscraper light or the skyscraper dark, both were designed around a little 4-foot interval. So I'm going to actually scale this so that this box is much, much smaller. So I'll use scale 1D to control how I'm scaling this. So the first one here, I'm going to snap from that point to that point, and I'm going to bring this and make it a little bit smaller. We'll do it at 4 feet. Then I will again scale 1D, and we'll do from, let's see here, this front point. No, we can do it from the back. We'll do it from there to there, and that is also going to be 4 feet. And then I'm going to scale my height to be one of the floors. So I will again scale 1D, and I'm going to go from the bottom here all the way up to the top. And that will be 16 feet, which was my floor-to-floor height. And so I end up with this nice little, oops, I didn't scale it correctly. Let's try that one more time. Scale 1D. Could I have done this scale 2D? Sure, but I think 1D gives you a little bit more control over how you're scaling. 16 feet. There we go. So now I have this set as a much smaller piece. The advantage of setting this is there's little pieces of this particular material that aren't that are not transparent like glass. They're a little bit more solid. So you end up seeing a repeating pattern. I don't know why it's not showing up on this particular material. Actually, I can load the dark, and let's see if the dark one shows up a little bit better. Let me go in and to my V-Ray materials, and let me go ahead and load up the dark and see if it shows up better on the projector here. I'll right click and say apply to layer skin. And it looks like in both cases my preview really doesn't show these particular pieces. That's unfortunate. We'll see if it, in rendered form, works a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my floors here so that I can see those floors. And I'm going to move this texture map, snap to that corner, so that it's up on this first floor. I know the bottom's going to be a little problematic because it's bigger, but we're going to move it up so that it's on that floor. This will establish our texture to be the right size for the floor itself. At this point, I'll go ahead and hide the texture map, and I'll trust that it'll work correctly. We'll come back to it in a second. And I want to look at the floors. They're on. Let me turn off the skin. There we go. I'm going to look up at the top here and see if the texture for the floor is right. Doesn't really look quite right yet. So I'll select all of the objects, and I'll go into my texture mapping again. So I'm going to apply let's do a planar mapping for all of these. That'll be coming down from the top. So we'll bounding box, world, just a U and V, that's fine. If we look at it, it's a little bit better, but the scale is still off. So let's take all of those and let's come down here to the UVW repeat. We'll lock it and we'll do it at about, let's try 5. Let's see if that's a little bit better. Yeah, the scale seems a little bit better for the scope of this. It may need to be a little bit more. I might take those and I might go up. Let's try 10. Let's see what that one looks like. Yeah, it seems a little bit better. So I'm just looking at it, trying to double check what feels right. So I've got that established. We can go back to my layers. I could turn off the floors now. I could turn on the ceilings. Pretty hard to tell what the textures look like. We'll just go with those. Let me turn on the core. And the core shouldn't be glass. It should be some kind of a concrete. So it looks like I applied the wrong material. So we'll go in here. And let me apply material to layer. There we go. And again, I have to do the texture mapping. So we'll go back to my properties here. We'll go to texture mapping. We'll do a bounding box. We'll do world, and we'll go ahead and cap it. Over here, I'm going to do x equals y equals z, so at least the textures all match. And then we'll change the repeat. Let's do it at like 10. And that feels a little bit more like an appropriate scale. So at this point, I can turn back on my other layers here and build back up my building. This topmost surface, sorry, it is currently on the skin layer. I'm going to go ahead and explode it. And I'll take that top surface that is currently glass. I don't want that to be glass. We'll go ahead and apply the floors. I'm going to change it to the floors layer so that we have a concrete texture on the very top. Likewise, the very bottom surface, right there, I'm going to change to a floors layer as well. There we go. So now this whole building is ready to bring in to a scene. So let me switch back over to shaded so we can see it. Yep, looks good. I'll go to File and then Save, or I could do a File and Save As and move it into today's folder instead of last class. So let's go into 215 and we'll go ahead and save it. Perfect, so that's ready to bring in. The next piece of the puzzle that I need is the city of San Francisco. So I've gone ahead and I've pulled up exercise 215. This is today's exercise. And under part 2, download sfdowntown.3dm. So this was a file, and this will actually take you to Dropbox because it's a rather large file. It's faster for Dropbox to send it to you than for me to. You don't have to sign up for Dropbox. You can just go to direct download and you'll be able to download the file. This was a file that was made by some of the students. It was some of the grad students at Berkeley, probably 10 years ago, maybe a little longer than that ago. So it's not perfectly accurate to what the city landscape looks like today, but it's reasonable. Unfortunately, they made it out of a mesh, and that mesh makes it a little bit harder to work with and a little bit heavier, but I don't have another model to work from, so this is what we're going to work from. So I've gone ahead and I've downloaded it. Excuse me. I'll go ahead and open it up in Rhino. And there it is. If I orbit and zoom out here, we can see the city. There we go. There's some pieces that are kind of floating out there, but I've put our site right down here in downtown with a bunch of other buildings around it. What we're going to do, because it's pretty hard to do a photorealistic rendering of all the buildings around, we're going to take the city and just make it all white. So it'll be kind of a glossy white texture, and then we'll put our building in and render our building against the glossy white. And I think this is a pretty good strategy when you're doing renderings sometimes, to just isolate what you want people to focus on. So in this case, we're focusing on our building and forget the rest of the buildings. So if we look at my layer structure here, I have the San Francisco model, and I have a building site. And I deliberately put a building site here for you, so you have a place to snap to so that your building can sit nicely in this particular context. The other thing that I have is I have two views that are established for you. So if you go to your views here, you go to set view, I have perspective 1 and perspective 2. Ultimately, I'm going to ask you for a third perspective, but for today, perspective 1 and perspective 2 are street level, looking down the street at your building. So in both cases here, if I go to set view and I go to perspective 1, oh sorry, let me go to set view, perspective 2, it's another example looking at the bottom of your building. So at this point, I'm going to bring in my particular building as a block reference. So we'll go ahead and go to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. And this works the same way as all the rest of the blocks that we've worked with. So it's a reference file. I'm going to browse for that file that I just saved. So it was in today's folder. And it was that file there. I'm going to link it as a reference. So I'm making sure I check those two boxes. So it is linked as a reference. We'll go ahead and say OK. These options are fine. OK. It's going to ask me where I want to put it. So I can zoom out a little bit so I can look down at my building here. And I'm going to, let's see here, I'm going to put it right there. Then I need to rotate the building. So I'll type rotate. It's not a rotate 3D, it's just a regular rotate, so that I can get on axes. This is on Market Street, so it's on that diagonal going through San Francisco, so I need to move it around to there. Now it looks like the, call it the fun side of the building, is facing away from where I wanted it to be. So it might be worth going back and flipping the whole building around so that I have better organization. The other thing I could do is I could put this corner, at least as a start, I could put this corner right there, and then I could rotate the whole building again like that. That at least gets the kink to the front side of the building. But again, I could play around with it and I can evolve it. And you guys may decide that you want to evolve it too, once you figure out where the context is going to be and where the building is going to be. So when it comes to rendering, I said we were going to make all of this background kind of a default color. And so we'll go into our V-Ray asset editor. And the color that I think works nicely is a white porcelain. I don't know in the current version if they have white porcelain. Hold on a second. Ceramic and porcelain. Here we go. Oh, they do have a white porcelain. So you could use their white porcelain instead of my white porcelain. It doesn't make any difference. We'll go ahead and right-click on it and say Apply Material to Layer. And it's going to be the SF Model layer. It's also going to be applied to my base, my building site. So it's applied to both of those. That essentially makes the entire backdrop of this white, and then my building has its materials already applied to it. We can see those right here under my skyscraper. So now that we have those applied, we have our materials ready, it's time to think about the sunlight and sky system. Now I do know that I deliberately skipped a few steps, step 5 and step 6 under part 2. that have to do with the V-Ray mesh object. I will come back to those. You don't have to do it. It's kind of an optional step. I will introduce the concept to you guys today, but sometimes it crashes when you try to do it, and sometimes it takes forever to create the proxy object. So no reason to make you wait now. We'll finish everything else, and then I'll come back and show you that part of it. So I have this ready. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So let me go to File and Save As. And I want to put it in today's folder. The mesh file, the San Francisco file, is a pretty large file, so it tends to slow things down a little bit. If you're struggling with moving around in your object, you can always turn off the San Francisco city model background, and that'll let you work with your objects a little bit easier. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've saved it. So the next piece of this is to understand how to insert a sun and pick a specific time of day for this particular scene. So to do that, I'm going to come up to the V-Ray toolbar here, and I'm going to click on the sun icon. This opens the sun creation panel right here. I should also point out that I have updated the tutorials on the course website. So if you go to tutorials and you go to V-Ray and you come down here, we're going to be working today with 8.17 for sun, 8.18 for sky, and 8.19 for the physical camera. So all of those are worked out. So everything that I'm about to do is written out right here, so you can go in and double check. So I've gone ahead and I've started the sun creation toolbox. So here we go. Right there, I click on the sun icon, and then I get the sun angle calculator dialog box. I want to make sure that manual control is unchecked because I don't want to manually have to control the sun. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom under location. You can minimize these little pieces as you get to just location. That's certainly an option. Now when it comes to location, I'd like to get something close to where San Francisco is. Now it happens to have San Francisco already built in, so I just have to start typing San Francisco and it will show up. I'm going to make sure that it's highlighted in blue. That effectively is picking San Francisco as my point. Apparently, you can click the Here button, and it's supposed to figure out whatever's closer to you. I don't know that that works just yet. So I've gone ahead, and I have a location. The next thing is to expand date and time. This is where we're picking a date and a specific time of day. So we're in October. It's today. We're going to pick what time of day. I tend to like it either early morning or late afternoon. I think the shadows get a little bit better. It makes the rendering more exciting. So I tend to pick one of those times. So early in the morning or late afternoon. Right now we are on daylight savings time, so I'm going to check the box for daylight savings time, which shifts the clock. So that's good. And once I have those set, I can go ahead. I don't have to worry about sun position because it automatically adjusted. You can see when I change the time of day, the sun position and angle, the azimuth and altitude are changing. So it's much easier, in my opinion, to pick your location and then date and time than it is to figure out what your azimuth and altitude should be for the sun. So we're going to use it to our advantage here. When I'm done, I'll go ahead and click the OK sign. And one of the big mistakes people make when it comes to sun is they don't actually put the sun in the scene. They go through the options and they select what date and time it is, but they never actually click in the scene to install the sun. And so here, in my opinion, you have two options. You can put it at the origin at 0.00, or you can snap it to something where you know where it is. So in my case, I'm going to snap it to my building. So I'll come to this upper corner here, and I'll go ahead and just click on that upper corner, and it will snap my sun right there to the upper corner of the building. So let me deselect that here. That blue object, now it's highlighted in yellow, is now my sun as it's coming in. Now, if I find that I really don't like the sun in its current position, so one of my two renders are going to be such that I probably want to light the other side. Really, I should have had morning sun. If I want to change the sun, if I click on the icon for the sun, there it is, and I go to my properties, One of the options here is the light properties. And when I click on that, I can go in and I can edit the sun. So if I click on this edit button here, it's going to bring back the sun options and sun position. Now you say, wait a minute, how do I know what these values are? Well, here's where you can uncheck manual control and gain back things like your location, etc. So I'll open up location and I'll go back through and I'll type in San Francisco. So same process here for San Francisco. I'll select it so it's highlighted in blue. I'll come back up to my date and time. It's daylight savings time. We want it to be in the morning. There we go. Today's date is just fine. We'll go ahead and say OK. And it's going to edit and manipulate my sun to change. So you can always go in and change the sun. The other thing about the sun is if I have it selected, I can click on this Edit in V-Ray Asset Editor. And what this does is it shows me the sun and any other lights that I have installed in the scene. This is something that's new in this version of V-Ray compared to the old version of V-Ray, and that is that I can actually double-click on the name of the sun, and I could add an extra description. So I could, for example, put in today's date, 10/16. It's the 16th, right? Yeah, it's the 16th. 10/16. Oh, it won't let me do special characters. How about a dash? 10/16, 19. And if I paid more attention, I might know that it was 8 a.m. I don't know. The point is I could put more information in. The reason that this matters is I could create suns for different times of day and do different renderings based on which sun was on and which sun was off. I can also turn on and off a particular sun by putting it on its own layer and turning it on or off. Or I think I can, yes, I can click on the sun icon right next to the name and turn it on and turn it off that way. So I could actually do multiple renderings for different times of day with different suns installed. So something important to kind of be aware of. So now that I have that, I've got my sun. The next piece of the puzzle is installing a sky. So if we've worked before, if I go to the V-Ray, again, I'm in the V-Ray Asset Editor here. If I click on the gear icon right there, it brings up the V-Ray settings. And we've worked before in the V-Ray settings, and you guys have expanded the setting for environment. Previously, we clicked on the background color and changed the background color to white, for example. Like that. Well, instead of using a background color, we want to use a background sky. And so if you were looking out at the sky, of course today's a cloudy day, so it's not as good of an explanation. But if it was a perfectly sunny day, there would be a gradient of color that goes from lighter at the horizon to darker blue as we go up. And that has to do with the atmospheric effect and whatever. It doesn't really matter the technicalities, it's just an observation. Rhino can mimic that based on the time of day of your sun. So it can adjust what the gradient would be in the sky. So we want to do that. And in order to do that, I'm going to work here with the background first, and I'm going to come over to this little checkerboard pattern. And when I click on that checkerboard pattern, it's going to do nothing. Love it, right? Oh, come on. I promise you, I've gone through this several times to make sure that this is what I'm doing. And of course, it's not working. Let me save it and open it again. See if we can get it to work here. All right, let me make sure nothing's selected here, and then let me try that one more time. Oh, come on. Oh, I love it when things don't work. So nice. Okay, sorry, I apologize. I'm going to close Rhino altogether, and then we'll start this whole thing over again. This is ridiculous. Well, let me pick either one. All right, well, I got to figure out what's wrong. So bear with me for a second while I sort this one out. So I have no idea why, but it was being cranky about it. So I right-clicked on the checkerboard, and when I did that, I could select clear, and then I could go back and click the checkerboard, and this opened. I did this yesterday and didn't have to do that. So I don't know why it was forcing me into doing that. Anyway, once I've done that, it's going to open up the ability to select a different type of background. So we've done color before. If I come down here, there's one called sky. If I click on sky, that's fine. It's going to use settings based on what my sun is in the scene to determine what the sky looks like. So under sun, I have to make sure that my correct sun is selected. And this is where renaming that sun so that you know which sun it is can be useful. So in this scenario, I'm going to use the sunlight for 8 a.m. And so that's picked as the sun. The rest of these options are just fine. So I can scroll down here. Everything else is fine. Even under options, those are all fine as well. So I have everything selected. I'll click on back. And I now have an environment that's going to have a blue sky behind it. And it's tied specifically to the sun that I have in the scene. And that's the important thing. So you create the sun first, then you create the sky environment background. So I'm going to go ahead and close this for right now. So my V-Ray asset editor is done. I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at my view. So let me go to set view and I'll go to perspective 1 to start. There's my view. We can see the building there. Obviously, it's cut off in my view. So before I perform a rendering, I need to kind of think through what's happening and am I going to get the view that I want. So if I go back into my V-Ray asset editor here and we go into my render output right here, right now I have an image width and height of 320 by 240. It's set up with an aspect ratio of 4:3. Sometimes you'll convert this to, say, widescreen, or sometimes you'll convert it to match viewport. So what you see is what you get during the rendering. In this case, I want a rendering that's much, much taller and much narrower in size because I want to see my whole building. So when I do that, I'm going to go to custom here, and I'm going to set my image width. Let's do it at 100. I'm going to do these as small numbers. And we'll see if it'll let me fix this one to like 400. No, it's forcing me into this. All right, so let me do it at like 0.3. That's 400 high, so I'm rendering tall and narrow instead of the other way around. I'm doing these as really small numbers, so my initial rendering is going to be small until I confirm that it looks the way I want it to look. So now at this point, if I were to go ahead and start a render, which is not using the dimensions that I want, let's try that again. There it is. Now it's doing the dimensions that I want. If I were to start this render, there's a good chance that my rendering is going to either be too dark or too light based on the settings. There we go, it's starting. And so I'll let this go for a little bit, but it looks like it's actually not too far off. That's probably because I pre-did a few of the settings so that you wouldn't have to. And so I'm doing this kind of test to kind of see. If the rendering appears too dark or too light, there are some options that we can adjust. So I'll let that one keep going, and I'll show you where these options are. So first thing is under camera here. We need to make sure that the camera is turned on, which it is. The exposure is turned on. And the exposure value, this is something that's different than previous versions of V-Ray. We used to just have a shutter speed to adjust. The exposure value is a little bit harder to determine. The larger this number is, the lighter the picture tends to be. The smaller this number is, Oh, excuse me. The larger this number is, the darker the picture is. The smaller this number, the lighter the picture would be. So that number plays a factor in what the overall exposure of the camera would be. So if your image, and I have this written out, if you go to 8.19, the physical camera, this will walk you through this. And I have, let's see here. Right, here we go. A higher exposure value will result in a darker image, and a lower exposure value will result in a lighter image. So I would go in increments of about 2 as you start to hone in on what looks right. And so as I look at this, the sky is turning out pretty nice in relation to my sun. I'm getting pretty good reflections off of my buildings. That's pretty good. It's a little dark at street level. I'm not overly worried about that. Looks like the porcelain material, the white porcelain, is more of a brown, so I might go in and tweak that just a little bit and get a little bit more white out of it. But again, that's a personal preference. So we'll let this continue to finish. And once I feel like it's good and the exposure values are good, I can actually increase the size of the rendering and perform a final render. A couple other details that might be relevant is under environment, you also have the ability to adjust how bright or dark the sky is by adjusting this value here next to background. This will come into play much more next class, and I'll show you this again. So if you just stick with the defaults, you're probably okay for today, but I at least like to point it out. Okay, so let's just make sure I got through everything. We did the sun. We did the physical camera to make sure that. Good. So at the end today, I want you to be able to have a higher quality rendering. When we get to these renderings, they can start to take a little bit more time. And because of that, we may choose to turn on what's called the V-Ray swarm. This used to be called V-Ray distributed rendering. I had it set up far easier to work with. The new one, there's a lot of automated steps that either work or don't, but I'm going to show you how to turn it on because there's no harm in turning it on. So at the bottom of my V-Ray asset editor, I have something called swarm. This swarm here, I can choose to turn on. And when I turn that swarm on, it will theoretically go find computers that are not working at there's my auto discovery is turned on, that are not working at their full potential that are on the network, and it will borrow some of their CPU resources to perform a better rendering for you. So that's something that you guys can absolutely turn on as part of your renderings. Okay, so I've gone ahead, I've looked at my particular rendering here. Like I said, it's not about making it perfect, but you can see that it's getting good reflections, etc. So maybe this needs to be a little bit lighter, in which case I'd go back into my camera, right here, and under my exposure value, I want to make it a little bit lighter. So in that case, I would decrease this number. Let's go to maybe 11, and I'll perform another test render, small render, and see what the render looks like. So we'll go ahead and let that test render. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch that, but I want you to kind of be aware that that's going to change. This is all going to be much lighter now as a result of that change in the exposure value. So we let it work through it. Hopefully it'll use some of the V-Ray swarm. And we will go from there. There you go. You can already see in that upper corner that the sky became much, much lighter. And as a result, the buildings are going to be a lot brighter. So adjusting that exposure value can make a big difference in your final rendering. When it's all done today, actually this one is probably going to be overexposed, too bright, so I'll end up finding another value that's a little bit closer. When you're all done, you can go back to your render output here, and you can increase your size. So I did this test render at 120 by 400. My increased size, I might go up to maybe 1,000 or so. We will ultimately be doing much higher quality renderings than that, but for today's purposes, you don't need much more than that. So I might go up to 1,000 on the larger number as the image that I post. Recognize whenever we start to get into renderings like this, there's downtime where you are letting it render in the background, and that takes a little bit of time for you to let the computer process. That's a great time to work on other things. A lot of you are in 220. You've got plenty to do for 220. Just flip over and work on some 220 for a while and wait for it to render. Okay, I recognize that it takes time, and there will, by necessity, be downtime. Okay? So I'll let you guys start to work. Today's about getting that sun and sky and the city of San Francisco scene in. Yeah, I can already tell here that this is turning out way too light. So in all reality, I should stop the rendering and I should go back to my camera settings and we'll try this at about 12.5 or so. And I'll start the render again and see if that one turns out right.